Coming up for a panel which is all about the best practice tips and tricks. So we're going to have Martin Macmillan back from our wonderful sponsors, Pollen VC. We're also going to have Matt Pearce from Trailmix and Henri Holm from Sandsoft Publishing. If you could tweet and share your, take pictures of the screens, tweet out to everybody using @PGConnect or #PGConnects, that would be great. There are a lot of people watching as well, which I'm sort of conscious of. So hello to all of the audience that haven't been able to make it here today. And I'm just going to hand over now to Martin, who's going to moderate the panel. Thanks very much.
Cool, thanks, Jackie. So I'm really pleased we've got two excellent guys up here with very interesting and varied experience. The whole idea of kind of curating this was to talk about experiences from different sizes of companies and so on, and to try and sort of distill some sort of best practice. So to go through some things around what everyone's done, and then to hopefully be able to have some takeaway nuggets that are useful to think about your own business as you're planning the financials and so on. So I'm going to let Henri and Matt introduce themselves, if that's okay.
Good afternoon, everyone, or is it still midday? My name is Henri Holm. I'm from Sandsoft Games, from Saudi Arabia, from the heart of Riyadh, where we make games. We invest to studios, setting up studios. We invest to making a name for ourselves in terms of a publishing company. But also we work on external parties to build magnificent games for a very wide audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Henri. Hello, my name is Matt. I am the FD at Trailmix Games. We are a mobile developer based right here in London. I have been in finance in mobile gaming for the past 7 years now, the last year of which was at Trailmix. And we launched our first game back in September of last year, which was very exciting. We are now focusing on scaling up the team to follow the growth in the game. And that's me.
Cool. So let's kick off with a question of when in a studio's life cycle should they appoint a finance lead or CFO, someone in charge of the purse strings? Is there a sort of like a right or a wrong time? From our personal experience, we see people often make these appointments way later than any sort of like a normal offline business that was making $10 million a year or whatever. So I don't know. Any thoughts on that? If there's optimal timing?
Yeah, if I may start from profiling the CFO role, really, so you can start getting the financial acumen in very early stage into your company. You don't really need a CFO. You don't even need a part-time CFO. The time when you need a CFO is that when you start really managing your assets. That could be your game, your brand, your relationships, building the company culture into the company that you can start to leverage with the external world. The game is always a centerpiece there. And once you get that role fulfilled, it is supporting the whole team, the gaming ecosystem around that game, not just a title on the a reporting line to a CEO.
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of Henri's sentiment there as well. I think earlier is definitely better than later. I'd probably hesitate in saying that there's a definitive moment that you can say for any company that's the point at which you should hire a CFO. It really depends on the stage you're at and your kind of goals and how aggressively you want to pursue those goals in the short to medium term. What I would also say is if you're seriously considering hiring a CFO, you need someone, a finance-shaped person in-house, full stop. Again, what that translates to, whether that's a seasoned CFO with X number of years experience, or a senior finance manager, for example, or even a COO with finance background, again, really depends on the company stage you're at. So yeah, it depends. Entirely unhelpful, but hopefully.
Yeah, I would have built on a little bit on that one. So when you go for your first financing rounds, you on your seed round, you don't necessarily need that role per se. You need, of course, the expertise, to show that you understand, the scalability of your business and business model and your game. come to the point that you are starting to chase for your A round and going towards your B round, it's a really good idea to have that role established. It will have a lot to do with your further success in terms of managing your cap table, making sure that not only your investors are happy in the end of the day and your ex-employees, but everybody who's actually contributing to the success of the company.
Right, so it's managing a wider pool of assets. It's not just the numbers. There's the whole brand. Everything else comes into it, and obviously the relationship with the investors and so on as well. And in terms of then, excuse me. So in terms of when we talked a bit about hiring, what qualities to look for, full-time, part-time. Any thoughts on? So I'm thinking when you get to the stage, okay, this is now. A thing. Do you go into it with someone who's managing maybe the finances of 3 or 4 or 5 different gaming companies who might be able to share experiences, or is there an inflection point where you say no, this just needs to be a full-time role with someone focused on us? We see people doing both. So I don't know if you guys got any.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in here. I think so. I would lean towards full-time. Again, it depends on the stage of company you're at. I think part-time has its benefits, especially if you're an earlier stage company, you can save costs there, definitely. If you are at a certain point in time, as we spoke to before, around Series A, Series B, you probably need someone full-time to take that pressure off you, the CEO, or your management team, and really unlock their time to be better spent on other things. I'd also say part-time kind of, with the right person, can work really, really well. The challenges are probably, are they working only for you? The gaming space is obviously highly competitive. Are they working for other startups at a similar stage with maybe a similar product? That's maybe not something you wanna venture down. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say that I'm not a big fan of a part-time CFO because it is such a wide role, and you're literally building with the leadership team, the company. So if you would go that route, you would literally be filling a organizational chart and a box with a name that would be there for, let's say, 1 day a week, on your company. That could help you in a fundraising stage, but I would recommend really look into more, a longer-term, sustainable, method of engaging that person early, entrepreneurial spirit, willing to take, equity stake, maybe, cut on a paycheck, and start building the company together with the leadership team and the co-founding team.
And presumably investors like it as well when there's someone with a finance lead or CFO with their hand on the rudder. There's pre-financing round where you may have a name in a box, and then you've got the post-financing round where the money's in the bank and you want it's under the stewardship of someone on more of a full-time basis.
Absolutely, and if you really think about it now, we in this conference we talk a lot about not only mobile gaming but mobile gaming, and then getting into the space of digital asset ownership. Blockchain itself represents something that could be seen as an absolutely amazing opportunity right now, but it is a risk management at the same time. So you need to really understand the compliance. You need to be able to be, as a company, to see where is this avenue you're taking, bringing you, as well as how much compliance and regulatory environment challenges you may face going forward. That is also a risk management from a publishing point of view. That which are the channels that you are now well presented as a game, and if something happens, how would you mitigate that as at the distribution point? Would you go for your own site, Android APK downloads of the files, or what is it? It's for me, it's a resource management question, and it is a very close to the financial matters here.
So, is there such a thing as a typical day? How do you? It doesn't sound like it's like a formulaic type of thing, but maybe I don't know. You can distill your thoughts into what a typical day could look like.
Sure. I guess the short answer is, at least for me, in my experience, that there is no typical day. Which is something that I love. I love that about my job. I would say, every day is a new set of challenges, and you probably, at least half of those you didn't know existed when you woke up that morning. And it really is a challenge to kind of flip over from the kind of analytical and logical side of your brain over to maybe the more holistic or empathetic or human side of your brain. And again, I think that variety comes from the stage of company that you're at. And if you are at a smaller or medium-sized company, a large part of my time at Trailmix is really what I would say more entrepreneurial. You're spending a lot of time dealing with things and being a really good thought partner for your founders, for the CEO, and helping them in ways that might not be seen as core finance.
Yeah, that core finance is actually quite a good starting point. So my typical day is less to do with the financial transactional activities. We are a team of less than 20 people. Finance manager takes care of all accounting matters, reporting matters, which leaves then a lot of room to play with the rest of the team. Play in sense that that we are building the company from ground up in terms of brand, what we stand for, what are the games that we actually involve in, what are the plans we put in place, and when you are putting this a team around a game or game plan. There's a lot what the finance person can also bring into the table in terms of not only the Excel sheets and user acquisition plans and anything related to the numbers, but also what is actually the financial model, the business model for the game itself. How do you manage these assets? How do you bring external parties into the picture? How can you build teams which are very game centric? And these game-centric teams will be, resourceful enough not only to build the game, but also start to scale the game. And this user acquisition, and money pool is really important part of the typical day.
So that kind of brings me on to something else then around how to structure teams. There's a sort of organizational design part to it. And again, look, we see lots of different studios. Some do a really, really good job of working together, and then some do a really poor job of being totally siloed in their thinking. So on one hand, you typically have, finance guys setting budgets, sitting on a different floor, maybe to user acquisition guys who are KPI'd on just getting the high value users, and then the monetization team over here, which are just tasked with, maximizing ad yields or whatever it may be. So we see massive differences in terms of how people think about the structure, where things should sit and why. So I don't know, maybe you can talk to that. Matt, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. So I think in my experience in gaming, I think a lot of the companies I've worked with have tried really hard to kind of break down those kind of corporate structure kind of barriers. COVID's done a really good job of taking that away from a lot of companies, and being co-located is an issue, right? Where you can bring people together, and specifically, I guess in our context of finances, if you can co-locate and have regular catch-ups in person, if possible, between your finance team, your UA team, your data or analytics team, as well as either your live ops or your product team, the better, the more context you have for, I want to say, most decisions, but really it's all decisions that you would make as a CFO. So yeah, to your point, the more context you can get from those people, whether that's a daily catch-up, whether you're co-located, like I said, the better.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to build on this one then. So we are a team of 20. Most of us are in Riyadh, but people are also in remote locations. So the best way to organize yourself is around the game. Number of games. Each one of the games will have its game. The mini CEO, the owner of that, the product manager or the game manager. And then the rest of us, we can, gather around the game, servicing the needs of the game. Each of the games will have different needs. They are in a different, life cycle stage. Some are, going from a soft launch to hard launch, which means, that, the needs are quite different than when we are just testing with a $25,000, initial, data gathering for user acquisition, data. So, it's really wonderful that, you see the game in a centerpiece, and then everybody else gets to contribute to that. It's a systematic plan how you bring it to the marketplace, you scale. There are also then your KPIs, your measurements. You have also, your financial requirements, needs, budgets are in place, and they are just drawn down for the project to go forward.
But to make it all about the game-centric.
It's very game-centric indeed, yeah.
Then we didn't really talk about this before, but how do you think about it so as things are returning to whatever the new normal is in terms of, I guess, what sort of lessons can you learn from when everyone was fully remote to, I guess, as a sort of a hybrid approach? Matt, you said you were quite a keen proponent of doing things in person. I mean, to what extent is that possible for you guys, or you sort of trying to make it a reality?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and one that's still evolving, right? Like nobody has the long-term answers yet. Everything's still iterating. We at Trailmix are on a hybrid approach. We are trying to be in 3 days per week and co-located for those days in central London. Obviously, that there has been a host of benefits that have kind of come out of the last 2 years. Working remotely has a lot of pros behind it. You can get a lot done. You can schedule your week in a really efficient way. You can have meetings, and you can get the social from the co-located days, and you can get your kind of focus time done from home. And then in terms of bringing it back to like the game team, or like kind of servicing the team as one, what we've trying to think about when it comes to that is we've been trying to shy away from a game team versus support team kind of mindset instead talking about it as in we're all one team. I think that really helps to kind of make interactions between disciplines or departments a lot more fluid and a lot more natural.
Yeah, I like that approach a lot. So we work on on-site those who are based in Riyadh daily basis, but then because so many of the people are actually remote, so it is a combination of the two. We meet on quarterly basis as a team. That is a good way to connect and make sure that we are doing the same thing on the same page. Yet same time, I personally feel that the remote way of working with a good plan is extremely productive, because you can actually start to execute the plan, and you start to see what works in the plan, and is everybody putting their best effort to get that plan working. Whereas if you are in the office environment, you may see results quite differently. Socially it's maybe more rewarding, maybe it's more creatively rewarding, but when you are really in the execution mode, you should definitely consider that remote work is an excellent way of getting things done.
Like that's a remote with a quarterly offsite, which is probably something people are going to look forward to.
Absolutely, of course, yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. So in terms of let's turn it around a little bit and think about investors. One thing, again, we get asked, what should I be telling my investors in terms of, okay, you've banked the money, you're executing it, hopefully it's going well. How do you think about investor reporting where you're getting the right information, the right quality of information across in a way that's kind of consistent with the expectation, or what expectation should you set up front if you want to, don't get over your skis in it?
Yeah, I guess I like to think of it as it's reporting is one part of it. Investors are hopefully your friends, and hopefully your success is their success. And to your point, Martin, I think you can agree up front what that reporting looks like when it happens, the kind of standard of reporting that they get, and you should really aim for two things. Number one being transparency, and number two being trust over time. So if you can make that reporting consistent, month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year, whatever it ends up being, I think that really helps you build up that relationship throughout the kind of cycle of your company together, and that kind of induces what it should be with that relationship, which is a two-way conversation, right? Reporting goes primarily in one direction from the company to the investors, but you should aim for advice and information flowing back in the other direction too, especially obviously if they're on your board.
Yeah, I like to approach it in a way that I want to understand my investors' investment theses and impacts. What are they looking for? How do I connect with them? Where does the money come from? What it's supposed to be doing? And am I then reporting and bringing the investor partner to the same journey with me? If I do have a brand, that I can bring the investor, as part of, brand in terms of either the game title, success of it, the user base, or maybe even better, the studio or the publisher brand, easier that journey will be. There will be often situations where you're going to be depending on that same investment partner again, that some of your plans won't work. So closer you are, of course, and better you describe the journey with that trust and transparency. Of course, easier it is for both parties. Then sharing your excitement, I think that's really important. Giving access to insight. So the very simple things that if you're getting a daily reports into a Slack channel, it's not a bad idea to give same access to some of your key investors, because they might be interested about it. There might be some insight that builds into their total portfolio of investments, and it supports their thesis.
Right. So share some of that sort of on the ground access to them, so they can see the flow of hopefully good comments coming back, or reviews, or ratings, or whatever.
Well, I would not go maybe that route, but I would go more on from the data analytics and then data gathering to a point that the way how you're looking at your daily data, for example, as a leadership team, giving some of that access, not necessarily all, some of that access through Slack integration is a very efficient way of having that daily communication without having those daily WhatsApps or calls or Slack messages from your investor partner, but they are aware where you're going. Are you on the track?
So probably just the fact that they can have access to it is enough. They're not going to be probably checking it as frequently as
that's
you
enough.
are.
Yeah, that's
Just
enough.
the
That's part of the
access.
that's part of the transparency.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, don't be afraid to be open and honest with them, and push back if you need to. Like if it does tend to be more requests given you're giving them more information to start with, then again, you can be completely upfront and be like, this is a lot of our time that can be better spent elsewhere. So be as accommodating as you can be and as helpful as you can be, but retain your focus on what you should be working on.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about systems and tools and so on. So I guess the sort of traditional, mental image of a CFO, someone in an office behind a massive Excel sheet the whole time, potentially a little bit disconnected from the rest of their business, right? That's obviously not the case here. And in terms of, probably Excel is still like a primary tool that's used. But given there are so many other systems, it's signals and so on throughout the business, whether it's user acquisition, it's attribution, it's monetization, whatever. How do you guys think about building, best harnessing that in a way that's helping you sort of drive through from the financial dashboard point of view?
Okay, so first of all, I would really count a lot on the external partnerships. There's so many of the great technologies partners out there. I take Martin your presentation as an example. So if I can bring someone like Pollen as part of our team as an extension, yes, it is a business relationship that we have. But I can also then tap into the resources, and this is part of this asset management or a resource management. I can integrate part of the external company's business model as part of mine. If I'm very game centric, for example, here, I can model more systematically with the data that I have available at the moment, with the user acquisition resources, call that that my drawdown bank account, combined together maybe with my my advertising partner. And putting those things together gives me a much stronger combination of executing the product in front of my investors. My next round of negotiation will be easier, and you don't necessarily have to go always the route of engagement and sentiment and everything else. Yes, those are your working tools, but as a CFO, you still want to be very financially driven. Ultimately, end of the day, you're here to make a great community who's enjoying your game, having great fun, but paying for the game's profitability.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as Henri points out, finding really good partners for your tooling, a partner which really understands what you need to achieve and how you need to, what you need to do to get there is key in any tool or any piece of software. I think, again, depending on the stage of company that you're at, I think that there's always going to be a certain amount of upfront cost, both in terms of money and time of your team to put into place that infrastructure. Hopefully that will pay off in the long run. And I think the other thing you should be doing when you're considering any piece of software is look at it as a whole for your business and not just isolation for that one particular team. Using a recent example from Trailmix, our head of data, she did a fantastic job of bringing in not just the core users of this this tool or platform that we're kind of trying out, and we've actually hit go on it recently, which is a kind of like a collaborative data science platform. She brought together the key users, which is obviously the data team, but also the finance team, the UA team, the live ops team, the product team, to really test it out before we decided to hit go on it. So yeah, collaboration, finding a great partner, and making sure you understand the upfront costs of investing in that tool and that infrastructure right off the bat.
And building it together, right? So it's not just like, the lonely finance function's got to make everything work together. It's like, okay, now we're gonna sit down all together, and this is the goodness. We design it, and this is the goodness, and everyone's got their different angle presumably on it, but it's all fed off the same base. Is that the sort of the goal you were trying to achieve?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think everybody brings to the table, especially when you bring people in early enough, they can bring a brand new viewpoint to it, and hopefully you get the best result, not just for that team, but the game and the product, the company, and the game overall.
Yeah, my recent example is that, we got a new team member on performance marketing, our CMO, and he brings with himself, a lot of experience, of course, but also then, thinking and methodology that we can now leverage as a team, that we can really challenge our previous ways of working. Looking at the now the newcomer bringing into something new into conversation, and it is a co-creation process still. You have to really look at every game on its own right. What's the the gameplay and the content, the depth of it. What's the LTV. Overall, your examples, going into a 2-year cycle, it might be a very long cycle to think about, when you now testing and launching the game, when the market is moving so fast. Take an example, what's happening now in the blockchain gaming and NFT games, for example.
Okay. Jackie, in terms of timing, we've got...
Okay, 10 minutes.
So, is that 10 including the Q&A? Yes. So let's maybe go for another 5 or so. Well, no, because I was going to ask my main question of these guys, which we're saving best to last, which is the open-ended one around biggest lessons learned and things you'd wish you'd done differently or earlier. Who wants to go first?
I want to go first. Confession time?
Yeah.
Okay. One thing is that, I look back, so my background is that, I spent my CFO years in a very large multinational company. I was a CFO for a China operations on the largest taxpayer within the country. We manufactured mobile phones at that time, and also invested into a lot into gaming and application ecosystem. Now, crossing over there to the Rovio at the very early stage of the company, dreaming big, and having a very small team, 28 people, so to speak, in the beginning. Putting that last 11 years of journey together, I would say that one of the things, and again, thinking about this from a founder's point of view, it's really important to think about your company in a very brand-centric way. In a way, what do you really stand for? Who do you actually attract? Who are the people who you want to be working with? Who are your partners? And once you put that so much loved game in the middle, where does the game want to go? Where you want to go with the game? What is the competition around it? Then it starts to go into very, very deep into the fabric of the company, and there you have to really start looking into very holistically into the reward systems. How do you engage people into the journey? How do you put your reward matrix in place? How you start to remunerate them on top of the salary? What are your maybe the cap table related equity stakes? Because you do not want to have a situation where people in a very early stage of the journey check out. Because if they do, the rest of the team who's actually delivering the goodness and the good stuff, are then going to contribute to those early people because it was not thought through thoroughly, and that is not necessarily going to be a very long and sustainable journey for the company. So I would say that playing even a cap table game, that how is your cap table going to change over every move you do, And instead of using your cap table of acquiring assets for user acquisition, use external other methods to do so. It's the most expensive way for you to build that company that you so much love.
I guess typically user acquisition is going to be like a huge thing. So it's almost like there's a finite amount of cake, and if you're able to increase the size of the cake by, strategically making equity awards that people.
Yeah, because you can pay. Bonus is cheap. It's really cheap. If your game-centric operation produces significant amount of free cash flow, you are not depending on anymore your external partners alone and your investor partners, but you can also put a structure in place that actually pays out, bonus and rewards to the teams that are delivering those results, and maybe the whole company. Understanding the role of equity is really important, because if you don't think and plan it early enough, you might be too easy to give out something that is extremely valuable, not productive. So bringing the partners in, looking at what are the assets around you, and again, really separating your company costs and performance operations from your user acquisition. Very important to understand that. One is a variable cost that can be capitalized, with a revolving credit. You used the word washing. Maybe not so much as a CFO, I would use the word washing, but turning the capital around, efficiency. It's a very different measurement of success than, you look at, then to the, people side of things, and you say, well, I want to, remunerate you with the ownership of the company. May be important, but maybe more important it is that, the cash you pay out from the business model directly as a bonus to people to pay for their mortgage, maybe, move into a bigger house. That's the connection between your company and the employees.
Matt, what's your dirty secret?
Maybe not a dirty secret, more of a personal learning, I guess. Biggest lesson would be if you do aspire to kind of a leadership role in a financial position, I think you shouldn't be afraid to take calculated career risks at the right time for you. And I think that is risk is something that we as finance people or accountants have a difficult relationship with in general. There is unfortunately no model which is going to tell you like this next move in your career is the right move for you and it's at the right time. I think to mitigate that, I personally feel like I've been really lucky and really fortunate to have people in my previous roles and my current role, founders, advisors, mentors, find those good people around you that you can trust and you can confide in and don't be afraid to ask for help at the same time. And they will empower you to take those calculated risks.
Cool. Let's move on to a bit of Q&A. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, and so just now, has anyone got any questions for Henri and Matt they'd like to pose?
Need a microphone?
No, not really.
I can repeat anyway.
Yeah, I hope my last doesn't. Thank you so much, guys, for the insights. Maybe a quick question for a game publisher. Where is the best place to look for an experienced CFO who has relevant experience with
So where's the best place to find an experienced CFO who really understands what you're talking about as a publisher?
Well, I would go straight to the competition, LinkedIn. It's something that when you talk about the CFO as a role, it is still a fiduciary duty. It's the first person to be called out and receiving a phone call if things are not going well. If your financials are not sound, if there's a fraud within the company, it's less of the commercial people who get the phone call. It's usually that person. So it really depends on what kind of role you're looking for and what stage your company is. But if you're in a publishing business, and you need, your CFO for certain reasons. For example, that you will be able to attract maybe more capital into your company. I would look, and benchmark against my competitors directly. Maybe go for second in line, and and then start, active recruiting.
Actually, I think you were you mentioned something. I think it was your presentation when you said that it's important that CFO understands like user acquisition economy and.
Yeah, I mean, there's CFOs and CFOs, right? And on one hand, you could employ a recruiter and say, hey, I need a CFO, whatever. And they say, well, I've been working in a SaaS company for the last 5 or 10 years, whatever. And then they're plunged into this completely different world around ROAS modeling and so on. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to get there, but they're not going to hit the ground running. And sure, they'll be able to take care of the other bits of the business, but there's a huge part of the business, or a decent part of the business, that's very, very specific. So if you say, hey, we're starting to grow really quickly, we need a solid CFO, and that person has then got to spend the next 6 months kind of figuring out how this all works and so on, they're not going to hit the ground running, as opposed to taking someone, or I like the idea of like the second in command, whatever. They've earned their stripes, if you like, and now they can move into more of a leadership role. Someone who can hit the ground running, who talks the talk.
So it's more like you would say it's just LinkedIn or some referrals, friends and family kind of referrals, or is there any? I
think LinkedIn's your best friend, and more so than a recruiter, unless you're super specific about it. You're going to be able to identify better people just by seeing where they've worked and what they've done, rather than giving some blanket brief to a recruiter.
And it might be so that even chief financial officer as a title is misleading, because it really depends. If you really want to find the description, what you just said, you don't necessarily need a CFO directly for that. You can really find absolutely amazing people with a strong mathematical, numeric background, who has some financial roles before, and they can grow into the role, and they can really take that role and own it. It's not necessarily that you need that lateral transition. So the people, I mean, Matt, maybe you tell, what's your background, What did you study?
Yeah.
What did you study?
Completely unrelated. I studied neuroscience originally before I got into accountancy, and then gaming from there. And I'd agree with both what Henri and Martin just said. I think you start with LinkedIn, get keyed in with a bunch of people on an informal level, go for a coffee with a bunch of people from a bunch of different companies, and just get keyed into that network and go from there.
Thank you, guys.
So we had a question over here.
Yeah, I've just got a very quick question. Hi there. Has the panel thought about the impact of digital tech, about digital assets, blockchain, crypto, in terms of how that's going to affect gaming, custody, valuations? It's going to be a big impact, and obviously quite a lot of this conference is how to integrate the metaverse and all that kind of stuff. That's going to have a massive financial impact on the valuation of the businesses.
I'll let Henri jump in, but I guess we have been talking about blockchain in gaming for a number of years now. So, I mean, I'm by no means an expert. I am skeptical on the kind of value proposition on a player level. I'll hand over to Henri at that point.
Okay, so I started 2017 autumn exploring what could this technology Web 3.0 give us as a company. That time as a CEO of a publicly listed company in Canada doing blockchain-based esports and sports betting. So scalability was one thing. It's absolutely amazing how you can actually scale with some of the technology choices that you do, and you don't have to accumulate so much of internal manpower or resources inside of the company. Two, then looking at the business model itself, how is that going to maybe disrupt or change? I'm personally a big fan of it. You build absolutely amazing games that that are fun to play, and then there is something related inside of the game that has this ownership value. The tradability of that ownership is very exciting, because now you can kick in a new business model where the royalties are actually accumulating wealth either to the original owner of the intellectual property or minter, or then the asset, and you can start building business models which are then quite different than it would be just one ecosystem in-app purchase. So I think it's something that is definitely worthwhile of looking into. Then, from a CFO point of view, taxation. So it's very unclear at the moment, how the taxation would be done. A few attempts there. You do about, this example is now from Finland. So you do a 6,000, transactions with your wallet, on NFT space, which is then not 6,000 NFTs, but transactions that translates into a tax liability. That's about 40 pages of Excel code just to report to the tax authorities, what did you just do? So there is a lot of consideration on this one, which we have not discovered yet as a community and a group. But again, if you do hire the CFO for the role, it's a really smart idea to put, that into that person's thinking cap because it is a liability.
Excellent. Any more questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been a really fascinating conversation. And thanks again to Martin and Pollen VC for their sponsorship of this track. So we're going to wrap
Cool. Thanks,
now
everyone.
with a nice...